Okay, folks, so we're going to talk about how to make sure the paddle doesn't go too high or too low. In the original Pong, they actually made it so that it couldn't go to the top of the screen to give a little weak spot where if you're really good, you can get the ball to go directly into that weak spot. It's pretty hard, but you could put that in. Or if you want to just go all the way to the top of the screen, that's fine, whatever you want to do. But when you make your limit for however high or low you want to make your paddle go, you have to remember that you're actually not measuring the tip of the circle or the edge of the circle. You're measuring from the center of the circle. So it's really about the y-coordinate of the center of the circle. So it's really this y-coordinate right here that you're limiting. So you have to measure sort of, if the y-coordinate of the ball or the paddle, goes too high or if it goes too low. So for high, because we have an upside down y-axis, we're checking to see if the paddle's y-coordinate is ever too small. And what you can do is you can just say, if it ever goes below a certain number, just set it to the minimum number. And if it ever goes above a maximum number as it goes down, just set it to the maximum number. So you have to sort of pick what is your maximum number going to be. So for here, let's say my ball's radius is, I don't know, or sorry, not ball, sorry, my paddle's radius is 50. So let's say that's 50. And let's say I want to have a 50 pixel gap at the top, just so there's a little weakness for the ball to get through. So if that distance here is 50, then I have to take into account the radius of the ball as well, because I'm measuring from the center of the circle. So this actual entire distance here is 100, the radius plus the gap. If you don't want to have any gap, then you can just use the radius of the ball, and that'll be fine. So basically, I got to make sure that the paddle's y-coordinate never goes below 100. If it goes below 100, I'll just set it to 100. And you can do that check in the game function. So you can constantly be checking every second of the game. Hey, is it below 100? Is it below 100? Is it below 100? And as soon as it is, you'll snap it right back to 100 as a minimum. And it'll only happen if it goes below 100. So that way you can make sure that it doesn't get stuck there. It's just if you try to go above it and you succeed going above that line, then it'll snap it right back down. So that's just an if statement you can write. If it ever goes below a minimum, then set it to the minimum. If it ever goes above a maximum, set it to the maximum. And you just choose those numbers as you wish. So that's going to be the idea behind kind of setting the paddle to having some sort of limits. You'll have to do two separate if statements for each paddle. So you'll do one for the left paddle and one for the right paddle. And you can choose what your gap is at the top. If you don't want any gap, that's fine. But if you want to hit right on the edge, then I think that would be sort of the minimum sort of gap to have, I guess, is 0. you don't want to go beyond, I guess, the screen is what I'm trying to say. So that's that. There's also the ball as well. Same thing for the ball. You don't want the ball to go too low or too high. And there's no sort of gap or barrier for that. It's just if the ball does go too low, let's draw an exaggerated ball. Let's say the ball is that big, and it's moving sort of at this distance. Well, it might move and get to sort of this spot, but that spot is still too low and it triggers the bounce code again. So you end up bouncing down again, and then that triggers the bounce code and you bounce up, but it doesn't quite get out, so it bounces down. You get that sort of shaking as the ball rides along the bottom or the top of the screen. So you'd want to use a similar if statement for the ball as well, two different if statements. One to make sure it doesn't go below a minimum number, and one to make sure it doesn't go up, or I guess that's the top. Make sure the ball doesn't go below a minimum number, and make sure the ball doesn't go above a maximum number. What should that number be? Basically, whatever your ball's diameter is, or sorry, I should say radius actually, whatever the ball's radius is, because you're probably using that to measure the collision on the bottom. I would just use that number as the way to calculate your minimum. So the ball should collide just at the bottom of the screen. So that means, let's say your ball's radius is 50, then what you should not go below is going to be whatever your height of your screen is minus 50. So if this is a 800 tall screen, then it shouldn't go below 750. If it does go, or sorry, I guess above 750 is a better way to put it because of the upside down y-axis. So if it does go, if the number for the coordinate for the ball goes above that number, just set it back to that maximum number. If it ever goes below the minimum number, which in this case would be 50, then set it back to that minimum number. Just an if statement to write to make that happen. You'll need 2 statements for the ball and 2 statements for each paddle to make that work. And if you want, you could try to come up with a more clever way. There's ways to sort of do it with less statements, but I think that's probably the best, the most straightforward way to do it. So hopefully that makes sense, and you can approach that problem and make it so that the ball never gets stuck along the bottom, and the paddles sort of have some sort of limit so they don't fly off the screen, and that should get it to go. Thanks, everybody.